Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Kevin Can F himself. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the whole situation of Allison visiting Neil, and, Neil's like, oh, I'm the one that's got you, but she's like, actually, no, you're the actual one that's got a connection to Nick. Neither one of us does. So if you try to take us down, that's just going to be your story against us, and you know who owns who in this situation. So, because if it comes down to it, it'll seem like you are the one who wanted to kill Kevin because you publicly had beef with him. So I love taking that element of, right, there's a little bit of, you get almost, obviously, there was a whole situation where, like, Patti was kind of on the outs, and that's why it's like, right, we can't do the whole, well, if you get rid of Kevin thing, like, it's all going to point to Patti because he publicly had an issue with Patti at the time. Granted, that's been rectified, but still, it's almost kind of now passing the puck to Neil in this regard, so. But Patti made it clear she does not want to know what Allison has planned. Allison, told her to some extent over the phone with the voicemail, but she didn't clear it up, and Patti's like, no, I don't even want you to clear it up. I don't want us to, I just want things to kind of be normal again, so I don't want to be a part of your plans. And I think that is a big part of their relationship, is the planning, all the terrible stuff that they're mixed up in, because other than that, they're just saying hi to each other. It's like, right, if we're not talking about that, what else are we talking about, Because they found a way to kind of bond over that, but if they're not kind of leaning into the thing that bonds over them, they're just kind of back to just casually talking to each other again. And I think you could tell later on it bothers Patti, whether she would outwardly admit it or not. Because later on she says the whole thing about how Allison sucks and everything, but the problem is she can't quite break herself of Allison because she does like Allison. Despite all the drama and all the complications that have come her way since, getting closer to Allison, she likes it. And that's, once again, and I might have talked about this last episode or maybe in last season, I don't remember. The lines between friendship and something more with Patti and Allison, I'm never 100% sure. I think it is just purely a friendship, but I always feel like it could teeter into being something more or not. There's a part of me that's almost like, I kind of hope it does become something more, just with everything that they kind of been through together. Very Thelma and Louise a little bit, So, maybe that's kind of the parallel and the vibe they're kind of going for in that regard, but once again, maybe I have to kind of think to myself, maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Whether it ends up just being a friendship or even if it is eventually turned into something more, I do love that bond between these two characters, And I think Patti just hasn't quite come to grips with that in her head necessarily, that she doesn't, because without Allison out of her life, when we're just back to saying hi to each other and just talking to each other like we have been for the past 10 years, this time recently, everything over the course of season 1 together, it brought them closer, and she does miss that, whether she'll ever admit it or not. So Patti's in this complicated space where she's trying to juggle everything. Neil's out of the hospital, but Tammy's also staying over. Now there's an awkward situation where all 5 of them are out on the street. Not 5, 4. Jeez, I cannot count. I was thinking 4, but then I was like 5, and I was like, no, you idiot, it is 4. But when they're just and Neil's being so coy about it and stuff, it's like, oh, hey, Allison? And it's just kind of this awkward thing. Especially considering we also know Tammy is not the biggest fan of Allison, but I think it is a jealousy thing because I think she's scared and worried that the fact is Patti spends so much time with Allison. Do you really see something's off of Allison? You don't think she's that great of a person, or is it just because you're kind of jealous because you see the way Patti is around her? So maybe the same vibe I've been getting is kind of what Tammy's been getting, or maybe just Tammy's just easily the jealous side. It could be, one or all of it could be true. So, but either way, I also love that Patti was also cleaning up, getting rid of every book, the book in particular. She would store her money, and she made sure to throw that book away. She's like, "Oh no, I'm giving it away and stuff." And she's just a little on edge. And at one point, it's like, "Oh no, they're eating Chinese food." And Tammy kind of took it away from her at one point. And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of weird." But she's like, "No, you're not gonna want this it's cashews. It's like, yeah, and it's like, you don't like cashews. Like, how do you know that? It's like, I pay attention. And I thought that was kind of, I mean, we see how Patti is to some extent in a relationship. And as we saw it with Kurt. I think there is a big difference between Kurt and Tammy. Like, I think she has a lot of walls up, yes. But I think you can see her walls are down at least a little bit more around Tammy. But I think they're down even more around Allison. Because despite everything, like, her and Allison can kind of talk about the real stuff that she can't necessarily talk to Tammy about. But she can never do that with Kurt either. So that's why I'm like, it feels like this, like, her relationship with Tammy feels like it's such a middle ground between her relationship with Allison and her versus, like, her relationship with Kurt. Like, it feels like Tammy and her, like, are in the middle of that dynamic. Like, whereas, like, both her, like, her relationship with Allison is on one side of the pendulum, and then Kurt's on the other side. So I just think it's kind of interesting. And I feel so bad for Patti too, because obviously Neil is kind of stressed out with everything. I mean, he's got PTSD, like even being back in the kitchen. Once again, I think it's such a great detail of like how much we're getting Neil outside of the sitcom vibe, because it's like, yeah, it's almost that thing of now that your eyes are kind of open. I mean, to be fair, we were kind of getting Patti outside of the sitcom stuff, but we got her even more so after she started realizing kind of how terrible Kevin was, but also the more time she spent with Allison, it's almost like you're waking from this dream that they've been having, and they're kind of living they kind of got a smack dose of reality now. And Neil is just not all there. He's, as he says, he's drifting, and Kevin's like, right, the only drifting is Tokyo drift, when it comes to like the Fast and Furious franchise. And Kevin wants Neil to be his, like, assistant. But then, like, the entire time, Neil was like, hey, I gotta tell you. But, like, Kevin kept being so dismissive. And I kept being like, oh, is Neil gonna find out? Patti's eyes were open last season. Once again, that line of, once you see how much of an asshole Kevin is, you can't unsee it. So, did the same thing. I was wondering, and I still feel like that is the direction that Neil's story is heading, because he is starting to see, because Kevin kept interrupting him over and over again. And we go back to that line from Allison last episode. He may ignore me, but he laughs when you bleed. And you kind of see that where he's like cracking jokes about Neil's circumstances, because, I mean, Kevin's an asshole to everyone, but everyone just kind of puts up with it. It's just kind of like, right, it's you're kind of caught in an abusive friendship where it's like, oh yeah, friends rip on each other all the time, sure, like, depending on the dynamic. But when it's a friendship where that kind of is a one-way street, like, he kind of sets the terms, and it's not like there's not an equilibrium there. It's just kind of like you have to go at his pace. He gets to talk shit about you, and all Neil's ever done is like, I mean, Neil's always been overly attached to him. The fact is, it's like, oh, you're my best friend, you're my pal. Even at one point, tried to tell him, it's like, hey, Allison, she tried to kill you. And it's like, oh yeah, I know. It's like, well, how would I not know? Marriage, they say is kind of like a death sentence, ha 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 ha. But like, he refuses to listen to Neil. And I know that's the most frustrating thing, because Neil's putting his everything, even to being an assistant, because it allows him to just forget about all the other shit that he gets to focus on Kevin. It's like, yeah, kind of, which is not a good thing. I say that as someone who bottles a lot of stuff up. It is never a good thing to bottle stuff up, which I think that you can almost see this parallel between him and his sister, like, who, because Patti does the exact same thing. I mean, granted, Patti's more so like not a sharer, which I'm very much, that's my issue. I don't open up well to people. That's been a complicated element in past relationships too. One in particular that really really came up, but yeah, I won't bore you with the details. But I think it's interesting how Neil is once again trying to like deal with everything by like burying it and working with Kevin. So he was supposed to get like a Red Sox cap from the storage unit, which I'll get to in a second, but he couldn't. And so he was literally freaking out back at the house, and he was like, I can't let Kevin down, because he wants to be there by Kevin's side all the time, because that way it's like, I can protect you from Allison so she can't try to kill you anymore, which she's not going to. But it's also because he feels like he's letting Kevin down again, but also it's like focusing on Kevin is the only thing keeping his demons at bay. And the moment he's not able to do that, it just, I think it all comes rushing back. And Patty's like, right, you have me, I'm always around. But for him, it's like, get out. No, you're associated with my trauma. Like, you tried to kill what was kind of our best friend at one point in time. It's like, no, I'm not going to, no, I'm not going to let that happen. So just go, leave me alone. You're just as much of the problem. It's not just Allison. You're just as much of the problem as she is. And despite everything Neil did, it still wasn't good enough for Kevin, because Kevin's like, yeah, being all your fault. And Neil's like, wait, what? No, it's like, yeah, I'm glad you admit that it's your fault. He's like, wait, am I fired? He's like, oh, I'm glad you realize you're fired. And it's like, and Pete and Kevin are like laughing it up, ha ha ha, and enjoying themselves. And then like there's Neil on the side, kind of like, he's always been a part of the crew, and now it's like he's kind of being started out just like Patti was. It's like, once again, like, things will never go back to the way they were, and I'm sure he's gonna blame Allison and Patti. But there was this line of like Kevin was making some wisecrack about Patti, and both at the same time, Allison and Neil said at the same time, leave her alone, and they both looked at each other. Because despite everything, despite his issues with her, he loves Patti. That's his sister, but also she's been there for him through thick and thin. So it's like, he doesn't like, it's just like, right, don't lean into her too much. It's like, right, when you were last season all about the kicking Patti out to replace her with the other Patti. But it's like, Allison is like also very defensive of Patti too. Also, I gotta really quickly talk about it too. I love how, like, Allison doesn't give a fuck anymore. Like, when she got her pearls back, she made sure to wear them in, and it's like, oh, like, Kevin almost was kind of like, oh yeah, you always kind of talk like this when you got your pearls on, because he makes a reference to like her being, like, they remind her of Wilma Flintstone, which I'm like, also, why is that a bad thing? But I'm like, in the grand scheme of things, it makes you, I haven't watched the Flintstones since I was a kid, so I'm like, does Wilma lean into a lot of, I was always more of a Betty Rubble type, but I'm like, Wilma, like, because I'm trying to think, like, does she fall? I'm sure she falls into some like cliches and stereotypes about like sitcom wives to some extent. I think there's a little bit of I think you could still, like, even though it's animation, I think you could still probably hold those same cliches and stereotypes in that regard. But still, I was like, but like, to me, being like compared to Wilma Flintstone doesn't seem like such a like a. I get it's supposed to be a jab, but I'm like, I don't see it like a beautiful lady, wonderful wife, and wonderful mother. Then I'm like, I don't know. But maybe it's just because I haven't seen the Flintstones in a while, so maybe that's just my perspective on things. But Kevin was like, yeah, I need to pretend like I'm a bachelor or whatever. She's like, all right. And he's like, so pretend to be my cousin. She's like, wow, it's less pathetic being related to you. Being related to you is less pathetic than being actually married to you. I'm like, and Kevin's almost kind of, he just dumbfounded, but I'm like, yo, I love it, because like, we're breaking that, dude. Because even all last season, Allison kept up the front. She's done with that. Just like, yeah, whatever, Kevin. Like, I forgot the line she said to him last episode when she just kind of bounced, and she did the same thing this episode too. I'm like, she gives no fucks now, and I love it, because she's like, I'm not going to pretend to like you. It's like, I'm not going to play into your ego. Like, me doing that, it's like, I'm just going to drain myself out. So do whatever fuck you want, Kevin. I don't care. I'm like, I think I love the energy, And just like how it catches him off guard that he's not quite prepared for it, because he's so used to like people playing and giving him his way, so. But circling back really quickly to the, what was it? The storage unit. The moment DeE was like, oh, like that's where Chuck keeps some of his value. Oh yeah, Kevin's got stuff in there too. And I'm like, what? And it's like, she's like, no, he doesn't have anything value. It's like, yeah, he put it on there. And then I was like, oh my God. Because I was like, right, the whole thing last season when the break-in and the season finale, he basically had all the stuff moved out of the house to make it seem like they were robbed, just so they could cover it for the insurance. I don't know if it's everything. They probably moved everything back, but like some of the more valuable stuff is there. And now it's like, okay, because Allison was not, Kevin, yet again, keeping secrets from her about the kind of valuable stuff. So she went to go find some stuff. She found the pearls. She found a card that she wanted to sell. So her and DeE went to go trade it at a pawn shop. That didn't go well because it turns out, oh yeah, that card was stolen. And so it's like, oh cool, Kevin stole it from someone 8 years ago. Interesting. 2 years into your marriage. So that's definitely interesting. I wonder, what's the card said Brenda and everything, so you're wondering what's that about. And the guy's like, oh, I should probably contact the police. And like, Allison's getting nervous, and DeE's like, yeah, like you're gonna do that. And they both laugh. He's like, oh, well, you think I'm that square next door across the street who's very like all about the rules? He's like, yeah, but I am gonna have to still keep this though. So I mean, I was like, well, it's like, well, I guess it's like, right, if it's something stolen and you get found with the said stolen thing, and they find out there's a transaction, there's a paper trail. If you paid someone, it's like that's gonna lead to Allison getting in trouble, but also you too. So I'm like, I get it. So it's like, yeah, it's probably better not to have any sort of actual transaction. But I did like a lot of the conversations between DeE and Allison when they went to see that private investigator. And she's like, whoa, I'm not sure if I actually want to leave Chuck. But then like she got on the phone and he was chewing her out about a missing can opener, which they found in the storage unit. But then there was that line of, God, I forgot how the conversation went, but it was about, not getting out, and DeE made some reference of like, well, I'm still living here, and you had Allison saying something along the lines of like, well, I'm still here too. Like if I'm talking about people stuck living in this town, she's like, I'm no different from you. I'm stuck here too, And it's not just that easy to leave. Because she even had that conversation with the reporter, who was someone she knew, who was talking about her in the glory days. It's like, yeah, you could have gone to at least a decent enough college, but you kind of bailed. And Allison doesn't really talk about it too much, but she's just like, things aren't as simple as you thought they were. It's like, oh, like, none of us were going to be able to leave this town, but you seem like you're the one who had a chance. And Allison was like, no, I never thought about it. And they're like, what? And Kelly was like, what do you mean you never really thought about it? She's like, I never really had the chance. So I don't know whether it was just the whole her and Kevin thing or whether there's a lot of other contributing factors. Because to be fair, being with Kevin cost her a lot of her future either way. It isn't just as... because from the outside, it is that thing of, well, why don't you just leave? That's been the conversation that comes up, but it's like, it's not that easy. He'll drag me back. He won't make it that easy. Kevin won't let me go because Kevin it allows him, whether he realizes it or not, or maybe on some subconscious level he realizes it, or maybe he is aware of it, but he does like feeling powerful over Allison. It's just like, because for him, his world is built to like satisfy him and it fits what he wants, and Allison plays the role, typically up until now, the role of the happy-go-lucky wife, and so for him, he gets to, live the life he wants to, and anytime he gets to he kind of has a tendency to neg his wife, There's also the Patti and Tammy situation where Patti went to Tammy after Tammy left, and it turned out the work thing she went to do is, oh, it's actually her partner died on the toilet Elvis style. You're like, huh, interesting. She's like, wait, so why'd you say it was a work thing? You kind of left out the fact is that you're going to a funeral where people are mourning him. But she's not too heartbroken about it because she was like, right, the only people that might have cared about him is me, which wasn't that much, and his two sisters who aren't that great either. But she was like, yeah, like he was from Charlestown or something, and it's like I was his gay black partner. So it's kind of like, yeah, I kind of covered for him before. I'm like, now I don't have to kiss his ass anymore now that he's gone. I was like, wow, I just love how they just casually killed him off screen. And part of me wonders, like, is there kind of supposed to be something with that? Because there's a casting thing that I was aware of that's coming up in the show, and I'm wondering, is there some correlation to that? Or maybe just... maybe just extenuating circumstances why they did that. But either way, Patti opened up to Tammy to the best that she can. Say, I know I have a lot of baggage, but she's like, I'm not. And it's like, oh, code, this and that. She's like, okay, stop guessing the adjectives. It's like, I'm just not good at, I don't love sharing. So it's like, right, all I said was that you don't like cashews. It's like, yeah, but still, like, I kind of felt like I was being invaded a little bit, but it is something I am working on. And it's like, oh, we probably shouldn't be making out at a funeral, but it's like, oh, where you go? It's like, well, I have something to do tonight. Like I said, baggage, but I'm working on it, so I think that's nice. I think it's putting her and Patti and Tammy in a good place. I don't think they're going to be together by the end of the series, but we'll see. But Allison didn't want to get Patti involved. She wanted to keep her distance, but she felt like, I have to do this. I need your help if I'm going to see this through. So, and Patti kind of leans into her saying like, right, my days haven't been normal since we started talking. It's like, because most of the days you suck. And Allison's like, I know I do. Like, you know, she's not even fighting it. She recognizes, like, right, what I'm kind of putting you through. Because it's like, right, everything that's going wrong, everything, like, complicating things. Well, there's still the whole nick of it all. Then it's also like, look at Neil. My brother is broken because of us. So it's like, yeah, you kind of suck. And it's like, you're right, I do. And it's like, well, and Patti was almost kind of taken back by, like, how, like, accepting of that she was. She didn't, like, push back or anything. And it's like, well, because it's like she's saying there's no more us. I'm just helping you with this one favor and that's it. And all this shit will kind of trail with you once you fake your death and everything. She's like, yeah. And when she's drinking, it's like, oh, you're not going to share your drink. She's like, it's vodka. You don't like vodka. She's like, how do you know that? It's like, you said it once. And once again, I think it's such an interesting thing that these two women in your life, you're not the biggest on sharing, yet these two women remember very distinct things about you, and I think that speaks volumes. So we also found out from the guy that the private investigator that she's meeting with that DeE ended up running away. Didn't she hawk some of his stuff or whatever? Either way, she ended up bailing and leaving. She took Allison's advice and actually left. She is going to South Carolina, I want to say. So, and Chuck apparently didn't take it well, which I'm like, I guess it's like maybe she took some stuff on the way out, or maybe it's just kind of very similar to the Kevin thing of like, no, he'll never like actually let you go, because it's like, it's kind of almost that you're my property type of thing, because it's like, right, you're already cheating on her, so why do you care? But she probably stole stuff on the way out, because it's like, right, 10 years of marriage and you kind of cheated on her with, it's like, yeah, was it even worth it in the end? So she's going to go live her best life. But yeah. So this private eye has no idea what he's really getting mixed up in, because even him and Patty's like, yeah, we're a lot. You know, the baggage we're bringing into the situation that we want you to help with. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. I caught a little glimpse of the next episode. I believe we're going to get some of how Kevin and Allison first met, and whether the entire episode is going to be dedicated to that, or whether just a fraction of it is. It's definitely going to be interesting to see that and just how everything else plays out going forward. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.